Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think in the interest of time, I think it would be a good idea to start. So first and foremost, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Maximiliano Müller. I'm a research fellow here at the Center of Animal Science at QUAFI at the University of Queensland. I do research in the areas of animal nutrition and feed technology. But today, we're not here to talk about myself, but instead we're going to be talking about the excellent research that Associate Professor Elham Assadi Soumeh is doing. Today, she's going to be talking a little bit about how alternative protein-rich ingredients for sustainable poultry production. Next slide, please. Well, I already introduced myself, no problem. So I would like to first do a bit of an acknowledgement of country. So the University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connection to country. We recognize their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. Next slide. A few housekeeping rules before we start. Just mentioning that the seminar is scheduled from 12 p.m. until 1. At the conclusion of the seminar, we will hold a Q&A session. So if you have any questions that will be you would like answered, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will address them at the conclusion of the seminar. So I would like to introduce the speaker of today's seminar. So Dr. Elham Assadi Soumeh is an associate professor in animal science and production at the School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability at the University of Queensland. She joined the school in 2017. She holds a degree in animal science and nutrition with a PhD from Aarhus University focused on branched chain amino acid metabolism in pigs. She previously worked as a senior scientist at Cargill in the Netherlands, leading applied research in monogastric nutrition. Her research investigates how nutrition shapes gut microbiota and influences metabolism, health, and productivity in both poultry and swine. Her work emphasizes sustainable feeding and precision nutrition, with findings widely published and presented at international scientific forums. Having said all that, the floor is all yours, Ellie. I look forward to your excellent presentation.
Thank you so much, Max, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you today. I too acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. My presentation today is on alternative protein-rich ingredients for sustainable poultry production. This one is one of the research portfolios that I have developed for the past 9 years here at UQ, and it's still going on. Just a little bit about the presentation overview. I will have some introduction about the existing problems in the industry. We will have some information and updated statistics and data on global and Australian chicken meat and egg farming, production, consumption. Then we will look a little bit into poultry dietary requirements and why do we need to have protein ingredients in their diet, and then what are the common protein ingredients, or what's the most common one, and what's the problems with that? Why do we need to kind of update our dietary formulas? And then I will talk about the alternative protein ingredients that can be used and the ingredients that we have been researching for the past 5-6 years here, and some conclusions and further directions. So, challenges to the global feed supply. Some projections, all of you by now know that we are increasing in population worldwide and will reach 9 billion people by 2050. This means that we need to produce more food by 70%. This needs to happen in a way that we have finite land availability or resources. So we actually need to change practices to make this extra food production mostly through using byproducts and waste management and improving the efficiency of food production. At the same time, we are also seeing a very good increase in the protein consumption or demand for protein consumption by 73%. This comes from higher income, the socioeconomic status of the world, also more awareness around eating healthy food, nutrient-dense food, and also the balance of protein coming from animal origins, specifically poultry, which we will talk about it further. We also have other emerging problems such as diversion of feed ingredients, especially of cereals towards biofuel manufacturing. Some more projections around poultry. Actually, poultry production is one of the most fast-growing farming industries worldwide. So the chicken meat production is projected to rise by 47% by 2030. And it is expected that chicken meat will become the most consumed meat by 2030. 41% of all meat types consumed. So when there is a higher demand for poultry production or poultry farming, obviously there is a higher demand for the feed that we give to chickens. There will be a constant like 4.4% compound annual growth rate for chicken feed through to 2030. We are also facing lots of challenges. So since COVID, we have not, stopped to have challenges in supply chain. So there is supply chain volatility, geopolitical disruptions. Also, there is a huge emphasis on sustainability, especially when it comes to changes in land use, such as deforestation and destroying savannas and bushes. So there is a huge emphasis on stopping this because of the sustainability and environmental aspects. Therefore, this will impact the feed ingredient supplies and imports. We also see huge crisis on labor and inflation as well. So, feeding the world in a sustainable way is one of our most pressing challenges right now. And let's have a look at the global meat production. So, the most recent data is all the way up to 2024. And as you can see, there is a huge increase in all meats, but you can see that a large portion of it is poultry and then followed by pigs. So by 2030, the poultry will actually be the most consumed feed, as I already mentioned. On the right-hand side, you can see the top countries producing poultry. So the world produces 128 million tons. This was for 2024. And the largest producers are United States, China, Brazil, India, and United Kingdoms. The meat consumption is also obviously following the production, so that is the driver for the production. Currently, in Australia, every Australian eats about 53 kilogram per year. Israel is the top chicken meat consumer with 73 kilogram per year, and then you have United States, Brazil, Argentina, all sitting about 47.8 to 50 some kilos per year. So chicken meat production in Australia has increased like 15-fold increase in the past 50 years. At the moment, these are the most recent data that more than 752 million chickens are slaughtered in Australia. This is about 1,435,000 tons in a year. And as I stated, it's 53.9 kilogram per capita consumption. Every household eats 2 times per week eats chicken meat, and there is a gross value of poultry farm is about $4.2 billion. So it is actually very, very high. And if you have a look at the below graph, you will see that over the past maybe 70 years, the chicken meat consumption is the green line. It has slowly and then a little bit faster increased, while the other meats either stayed not the same or slowly increased, but mostly decreased for sheep and for yes, for sheep meat. Yeah. Egg production. Egg is the other main product coming from chickens. It is one of the most complete food items within just 60 grams. It has every nutrient that a human requires, proteins, energy, vitamins, all of it. It has, you can see how massive increase in the egg production has happened in the past, let's say 60, 70 years. China is the major producer of eggs. It's 35.9 million metric tons of eggs per year. This is like by far, it's a big jump from the second most producer, which is India, with 8 million tons of eggs. And then you have all the other countries, about 3.3 million tons of eggs produced per year. Then average global egg consumption. The highest country is Mexico, 400 eggs per person per year. And then Japan, Argentina, Australia is at about 259 eggs per year per capita. And this is increased 9 eggs as of last year. So last year data was 250. Now we are at 259. If we look at the egg production in Australia, right now we have a national flock of 34 million hens. This is last year's data. The most recent one, I couldn't find any extra data for 2026. Out of this 34 million eggs, we get 18 million eggs per day. Sorry, 34 million hens, we get 18 million eggs per day. And it is equal to 6.68 billion eggs per year for the last year. So the gross value estimated at $402 million, which is a 13% increase from last year. So the industry is actually massive. So as we mentioned, every Australian eats about 259 eggs per year, and eggs are a very excellent or complete source of micronutrients for humans. The projection for industry, this is for industry, is to keep laying hens over a period of 100 weeks and get 500 eggs per hen. Right now, some good farmers may get there, but the majority of farms might be about 400 eggs from each hen. And normally the production cycle is about 80 weeks, unless they induce molting and keep them longer. But this is something, a progress that is in place. So chickens need nutrients very similar to humans. They are monogastric animals like pigs, like humans. Obviously, they are avian, so there are some differences. For example, they don't have teeth. They have a crop to store the feed ingredients. They can't chew it. But when it comes to the fermentation site in their gastrointestinal tract, they are also hindgut fermenters, meaning that there is a pre-fermentation digestion happening in the body. It means that first animals or birds' enzymes are digesting the food. Then whatever is not digested / not absorbed will get into the hindgut, where it will be fermented by the hindgut microbes. The fermentation products, mostly, specifically microbial protein, will not be available to the bird because there is no protein digestion or absorption happening in the hindgut. But there are some other metabolites produced by the microbes, especially if they are good metabolites. Then they are really valuable to regulate the gut-associated immune response and a little bit of the metabolism, especially cholesterol metabolism in the animal. Birds require water. They are similar to us. They have like over 65% of their body as water. So water is an essential nutrient, I would call it. It doesn't provide anything else but water. However, it is they need to, their metabolic water production is not sufficient, so they need to drink water. Then we provide them with feed, and the feed must contain energy, which normally comes from a starch. You can provide energy from oils as well. However, providing energy from oil has the risk of depositing more fat in their abdominal cavity. And we know that all of us now looking for lean meat. So that's how we have reduced the oil content in their feed. It makes the feed very dry, and we use some oil just for the palatability and also removing the dust from their feed, but not for the purpose of providing energy, not that much. Most of the energy comes from the starch, which is supplied by the grains in their diet. They require proteins, or let's say amino acids. They do not have any specific requirement for protein. They have specific requirements for amino acids. And therefore, in a precision nutrition practice, we try to make sure that their feed supplies all their required amino acids, specifically essential ones that their body doesn't produce it. So it must be provided by the diet. Non-essential ones can be produced in the body if there is a source of nitrogen and energy available. However, if the source of nitrogen is limiting, then they may become conditionally essential as well. As I said, we do provide some oil which supplies fatty acids. They cannot make omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in their body like humans as well. So we need to supply that in the diet. And then minerals and vitamins that are considered micronutrients. We do have accurate measure of every individual mineral and vitamin requirements, and we supply it in the form of a premix that has all of the required minerals and vitamins in the feed. It is added at a fixed rate into the diet. It's easy to manage, specifically for intense chicken production, meaning that we exactly supply them with the feed that provides all the nutrients that they require for perfect meat production. Right. So we talked about nutrient requirements. Chickens receive grains mostly to provide the energy they require through the starch, and then they receive oilseed meals, mostly soybean meal, to supply their protein requirements. Now, the grains are very much dependent on what region of the world we're talking about. Like in Asia, it's mostly, and US, mostly corn is used. In Europe, it's wheat and barley. In Australia, it's wheat and sorghum. So it's all regional availability of the ingredients defines what goes into the formula. When it comes to the nutrient level, some ingredients are a bit rich than the others. For example, wheat has a slightly higher crude protein level than corn. However, wheat also comes with a higher percentage of non-starch polysaccharides, type of fiber that are not digestible for birds, and they can create problems with their digestive system, such as sticky droplets and encapsulating other nutrients. So we need to add enzymes to help them overcome some of the problems. Soybean meal has been the perfect source of crude protein for birds over the past many years, maybe more than 50, 60 years. Soybean meal is a byproduct of oil extraction from soybeans. And these are oil seeds, provide a good percentage of a very healthy oil, which is extracted for human consumption. And then the leftover is a byproduct which is very high in crude protein and other nutrients. There is also a good amount of energy in it because of the remaining oil. And it is very nutritious and highly digestible for birds because its fiber is not too high. As you can see in the graph, the fiber percentage is below 6%. In chickens, we try to minimize the fiber content for broiler chickens because the most important, let's say, driver of them reaching their target body weight of over 3 kilo in a shorter time is a very digestible, dense diet. In other types of birds, such as laying hens or breeders, some percentage of fiber is actually required or beneficial to their health because the target is not body weight. The target is their longevity and other products that they don't need to grow very fast. So feed conversion ratio in other types of birds are different to the broiler chickens. For broiler chickens, we want highly dense, digestible diet with low fiber so that they can turn from 45 grams into 3.2 kilograms in a very short time, like 6 weeks. However, birds don't require soybean meal. They require amino acids, and this is where we can negotiate and we can talk about the sustainability of production. So what are the problems of soybean meal in the diet? Soybeans globally are produced in 5 countries. Like 90% of the soy is produced in 5 countries: Brazil, USA, Argentina, India, and China. Australia is too hot. Australia only produces up to 80,000 tons per year, which is not used for extraction of oil. So it's premium soybeans that enters human food directly. So no oil extraction of the Australian soybeans happen here in Australia. Then we require over 1 million ton of soybean meal, a byproduct of oil extraction, for our livestock production. A majority of it goes into the chickens, but some other percentages will enter other livestock as well. This means that now we are totally dependent on international commodity trades. This creates lots of uncertainties and risk factors in our supply chain, such as fluctuating prices, disruption to the supply chain, and dependence on international commodity trades. On the other hand, there is a huge debate about the sustainability of soybean production in some of the countries. Although there is a massive regional variation in the carbon footprint of soybean production. However, its production, specifically in South American countries, has been associated with land use change, deforestation of tropical rains, forests, savannas, grasslands. So they have literally cut the trees to produce soybean meal for chooks. And this is a major sustainability issue. This comes with destroying also habitats for endangered species. Then 77 to 80% of the produced soybeans goes actually into the climate, into the animal feed. Majority of the countries, except these 5 countries, are net importers of soybean meal. Most of the countries that are importers, like Europe or Australia, now are thinking of, let's say, a replacement or at least responsible use of soybean meal, because we would like to improve our carbon footprint of the meat and egg even further. So as you can see, there are again reports showing that the land use change has stopped in most of the countries or regions, and there is less carbon footprint associated with that. But if you look into the data, you will see that it's still happening. So the first part of deforestation globally and in tropical regions mostly have been the major, reason for climate concerns, and obviously changing them to croplands in tropical regions, such as producing more soybeans, are major contributors that needs to be stopped. Some people actually debate that the other grains, the other oilseeds, even produced in Australia, also may have similar carbon footprint. Yeah, it is possible. It is possible that carbon footprint can be similar to the carbon footprint of the other countries that are producing soybeans without having problems with land use change. However, just think of the shipping. We are also using huge quantities of fossil fuels to ship over 1 million tons, sometimes 1.2 million tons of soybean meal from overseas here to Australia. So at least we can talk about the carbon footprint associated with that huge amount of shipping that contributes to the overall sustainability. As we mentioned, chickens do not require soybean meal. They require amino acids. They require protein. So this amino acid or protein can come from any other protein-rich ingredient. So we can talk about alternative protein ingredients. What can we do? Can we replace the imported ingredient with something that is produced locally and sustainably, not only locally, so that we overall we improve the carbon footprint of the produced chicken, meat, and egg here in Australia? Similar research is happening in Europe as well. There are different types of alternative protein-rich ingredients. Some of them are considered traditional and some of them are novel ingredients. The traditional ones are actually kind of exist in industry for a long time. However, for some reasons such as regional availability or because their nutrients could not directly compete with soybean meal, they have not been entered into the feed formulas in industry. When we say feed formulas in industry, this is mass production. You're not talking about a small, industries, for example, organic industries or a smaller free range industries. We are talking about mass producers that require huge amount of feed. And because soybean meal has been so convenient and available most of the time, anything that could not directly compete with that, it's been set aside, and we have never thought of the sustainability of the feed that we are producing. It was more the outcomes of the chicken production performance. But now with the sustainability framework, these are being reviewed again. And by that, I would like to show you this is not the complete list, but it is some of the potential alternative ingredients that can be high in protein and they can actually partially or fully replace soybean meal. Obviously, the question would be, do they require extra processing or is the cost comparable as well to soybean meal? And also the volumes that we require, are they the same volumes that we import soybean meal? Out of this list, obviously, I need to mention that I have also published an ebook, which is now available in the Australian Eggs website. And it is around alternative ingredients used in laying hens and pigs. That has a more comprehensive list of ingredients. If you're interested, you can find it. It's available online for public. Out of this list, we have been working in my team, we have been working on these ingredients for the past 5 years. So a series of trials has happened where we have used either combination of these or one of these together with soybean meal. So we have kind of partially replaced the soybean meal with alternative ingredients and then looked into the performance, meat quality, gut microbiota, all the other important aspects of the chicken production. Some of them are byproducts. Some of them, for example, the one on the plant byproducts, black cumin meal, before we used it and we showed that this can be used as a partial replacement of soybean meal, it was a landfill. So it was completely wasted after extracting oil from black cumins. Although the quantities are not large, but they can enter certain industries such as organic production or free range production in chickens. One of our most viable ingredients is canola meal, and the reason is that canola is produced in Australia in large quantities, over several million tons. Not all of it is crushed for oil production because, of course, there is no demand. So Australian canola meal has been studied as a ingredient for chickens in the past, like so many years ago. But because it could not compete with soybean meal, it was excluded from dietary formulas. And then we started to revisit this ingredient and look into different ways of either processing it or mixing and matching different ingredients to make sure that we are supplying the birds with their required amino acids. And if that happens, then could we replace soybean meal in the diet? I must say that the Australian canola meal It is lower crude protein than a soybean meal. If you remember the protein content of soybean meal, it can go all the way to 50 some percentage. But overall, soybean meal is about 48% and canola meal is about 38% if it is not processed. And then the next limitation is on the fiber content. Fiber content of soybean meal is very low. It's below 6%. And then canola can have up to 15 to 17% fiber, which it introduces a limitation to be included in the chicken's diet unless we do something about it. Obviously, with the availability of crystalline amino acids at very, very cheap prices, we can now modify and supplement the feed formula in a way that it improves the overall balance, and we can then reach the bird's nutritional requirements. So I am going to present you the first study report that we have done a few years ago. And in this study, we actually had a 2x4 factorial design for a broiler chicken production performance slash meat quality study. We did two different dietary crude protein levels. There is also a big let's say, interest in reducing crude protein levels in the diet for several reasons. These reduced crude proteins can reduce these kind of protein-rich ingredients. When we reduce crude protein, we supplement it back with crystalline amino acids. These crystalline amino acids are kind of pure and very, very digestible. So it just improves the precision of our dietary formula to meet the requirements without being so wasteful. In our study, we had about 800 broiler chickens, slightly less. I don't have total numbers here. It was a 42-day trial, but every treatment, every dietary formula had was fed to 8 replicates of 8 birds each. So our number of sample for each dietary treatment was 64 birds. We used 2 levels of crude protein, one of them is standard and the other one just slightly lower, by 1.5% lower than a standard crude protein. Who defines the standard crude protein? This comes from the breeder guidelines. And then, as you can see, in diet 1 to diet 4, we gradually replaced the soybean meal with alternative ingredients. We mixed and matched a few of the ingredients, such as canola, sunflower meal. Back then it was available. After that, it was less available due to the war in Ukraine. We use wheat gluten meal, meat and bone meal, and also some amino acids, and gradually replaced 25%, 50%, and 100% of soybean meal in our diets. So remember, these 4 diets were then formulated in both standard crude protein levels and reduced crude protein levels. So we ended up with 8 dietary formulas. The birds were kept for 42 days. We did bi-weekly production or growth performance measurements, recording of body weight, feed intake, feed conversion ratio. We checked them every day, several times for mortality. All the data was corrected for mortality as well. And these are our main effects of crude protein. So when you look at the main effect of the crude protein, the only difference we saw was in higher feed intake in reduced crude protein diets. So they slightly ate more. However, their feed conversion ratio being slightly higher was not statistically significant. If you look at the main effects of the diet, you can see a clear decline in the performance, final body weight, for example, average daily gain, as the soybean meal was replaced by alternative ingredients. So from the first diet, which was fully soybean meal, to the 4th diet that there was absolutely no soybean meal, we had about 100 gram less body weight at the end of the cycle. I also need to mention that in poultry industry, because of numbers like volume of production, that 100 gram can be translated to millions of dollars at the end of the year. We talk about 5 shed in a farm, and each shed has about 50,000 birds, and they have 5 cycles per year. So you can do the math and see 100 gram less in each bird is how many kilograms at the end, and obviously multiply it by $3-4 per live body weight costs of a farm. There was no differences of average daily feed intake or feed conversion ratio when we replaced the soybean meal with alternative ingredients. There is a tendency for higher feed conversion ratio, but not super strong. Looking at the interaction effects, this was very, very important in my view, because if you look at the first four, which are replacing soybean meal under a standard crude protein diet, the difference between a standard crude protein diet and reduced crude protein diet was 1.5% less crude protein. However, more inclusion of crystalline amino acids, because we needed to meet amino acid requirements, but we just fulfilled that requirement by adding crystalline amino acids that are highly digestible. If you look at this, you will see that when we replace soybean meal in a standard crude protein diet, yes, there is a linear decline in the final body weight and average daily gain, no changes in average daily feed intake, and very slight or non-significant changes in FCR. But when we replace soybean meal in reduced crude protein diets, statistically they are not different. And even if you look at the numbers, you will see that we are talking about 20 gram change, less than 20, 19 gram, when the diet was completely free of soybean meal. The average daily gain turned to be totally the same for reduced crude protein diet. So this shows that it is manageable to do a precision feed formulation and replace soybean meal fully if we play with the ingredients and provide more digestible amino acids to fix the problem. It does mean that canola meal by itself is not a direct competitor to soybean meal though. Right, we did another trial where we used lupine kernel meal. Lupines are produced in Western Australia, and they are similar to canola when it comes to the percentage of their protein, slightly less actually. Maximum can be 48, but what we had from this was provided to us by Western Australian government, and they shipped us this lupine kernel meal. However, it's not equal to lupines because this is the kernel meal, meaning that the fiber is reduced. Therefore, we had a better protein percentage and a slightly less fiber than a lupine, total intact lupine. I'm not repeating the results here again because in this study, we mixed and matched lupines, canolas, meat and bone meal, and crystalline amino acids, and the results were exactly the same as what we presented for previous studies. So replacing soybean meal under a standard crude protein diet reduced the performance. The moment we had a slightly reduced crude protein and we supplemented the diet with highly digestible amino acids, lupine kernel meal together with canola meal and a few other protein-rich ingredients could fully replace soybean meal in our diets with not much of a difference in their production performance. What I have picked from my list is the black soldier fly larvae. I need to speed up a little bit. So black soldier fly larvae is a high protein insect meal that are used to actually valorize food waste in industry. At the moment, we have just finished the project and we are submitting the papers. One of them is already published. On the black soldier fly larvae as a protein ingredient in poultry diets. The larvae we used was reared on food waste streams and supplied to us by Goterra. What we did, we ran a specific digestibility trial first to accurately measure amino acid digestibilities of the larvae produced on the waste streams here in Australia, and then we used those values for feed formulation. And then we fed that to the chickens, similar setup of previous growth performance studies, etc., etc. And then as you can see, we used larvae in a dose response study with increasing doses to 3%, 6%, and 9%. And 9% was replacing almost a third of the soybean meal in the diet. So it was partial replacement. And then we had different waste streams or locations that we used for this trial. Although there was not there were not many significant differences in the production performance, but we picked, as you can see highlighted in the slide, 6% inclusion from any of those stream wastes being very actually good optimum inclusion level of black soldier fly larvae, where you can see there is no differences in the performance between 6 and 0%, which is fully soybean meal. So that is one of our at the moment conclusions, and we are working further on the samples, running proteomics, metabolomics, gut microbiota to identify every other aspects of feeding that to the chickens. From here, I have a couple of ingredients like duckweed, which is a aquatic plant. It doesn't need arable land. It needs water and it needs ponds, and you can just fertilize it and feed it to the chickens. We produce this duckweed or water lentils in our own ponds in Pinjarra Hills campus. And duckweed can be very, very efficient compared to soybean meal when it comes to protein production, and 70 times more efficient. It has a high fiber percentage though. In our study, we didn't do anything about it. We just dried it and added to the diet at different inclusion rates, and the conclusions were that up to 3% inclusion, which was replacing 10% of soybean meal, did not significantly reduce the performance of the birds. Although there was numeric reduction, but it was not statistically significant for 2.5% and 0%. The same happened with microalgae. We also fed the chickens with microalgae. Exactly the same situation happened, and we did not have any specific reduction in the performance. Right. There is a possibility of also using food waste directly in the chicken feed. There has been studies done, especially on laying hens. The best results achieved from 50% food waste, like just heated ground, and then 50% commercial feed mixed together. And it has produced some good results when it came to the laying hen performance. However, in our study, we didn't add food waste directly. We used it for the larvae production first. We do have more studies coming up. We are going to look at a specific processed canola meal, which has a higher protein and lower fiber. This study is starting in 3 weeks from now on. And I am excited about it because I believe that reduction in fiber content and increased protein percentage, although adds to the cost of production, but it will be a direct competitor to the soybean meal that we have. And hopefully we will have a winner here. So limitations to use alternative ingredients in laying hens, it includes nutritional aspects. There is a high variation in the nutritional composition and quality. And some of these data that are used in industry, they are actually not refreshed. Some of them are very old table data, or the old table data used to calibrate NIR, for example, and industry just uses NIR. I believe some of these major ingredients, such as canola being produced here in Australia, they must go through a new set of analysis with semi-purified diets for amino acid digestibilities, etc., to make sure that we have fresh data on their nutrient level and digestibility level. Also, we require more processing techniques to make them better for chickens. Obviously, what we are going to include in our dietary formula for future must be something that is not competing with human nutrition, because talking about the future, we don't have the resources, the lands to produce enough crops for humans and animals. So we must try to improve our techniques and processing techniques specifically to use byproducts for animal farming. three major criteria determining the regular use of alternative ingredients in commercial diets. It must be available in good quantities and availability throughout the year, so it should not be seasonal. The price must be competitive with the current ingredients because the practice in industry is least cost feed formulation, and also we prefer to work with high variation and high digestibility and low variation in the feed ingredient. That will help to include these ingredients into the commercial feed formulations. Some more information in there about domestic production volumes and biosecurity, safety regulations, such as black soldier fly larvae, which is produced on food waste. It is at the moment being tested for biosecurity and safety and regulations. And I believe in the future we will have all the knowledge we require to include these alternative ingredients and replace soybean meal from our formulas. Some more aspects of nutrition is that formula of the diet must be based on digestible amino acids rather than total amino acid, and therefore we require fresh data on digestible amino acid of ingredients. We need to use more synthetic amino acids because they are highly digestible and available. And then we also need to look into different supplements such as enzymes and, even fermentation, solid state fermentation techniques to improve the nutritive value of locally produced and sustainably produced alternative ingredients. By that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ellie, for that wonderful presentation. Before we move into the Q&A, I do have a couple of questions to start with. So the first question that I have for you, before I can start looking into the Q&A tab, what about the sensory aspect of meat and eggs, for example? So because we understand that by providing alternative ingredients, that could potentially have an impact on how egg tastes or meat tastes, and that therefore could have an impact on consumer preference. Are there any studies or information on potentially the impact of canola meal or BSFL on consumer preference, meat flavor, egg quality?
Thanks, Max. Absolutely great question. We have, in all of our studies, we have definitely done physicochemical properties of meat to make sure that there is no change in the pH, color, texture. It's tenderness, all of it. Unfortunately, I haven't done any sensory analysis, but I have had other studies, or I have read other papers that they have done sensory analysis on meat from different parts of the world. Obviously, if we go really, really different feed formula, like fully black soldier fly larvae or some very aromatic ingredients, including them into the diet, then a sensory analysis required to make sure that the chicken meat is tasting the same as chicken meat that consumers prefer. But we have done physical chemical properties of all of the studies.
Okay. We do have a question here. Someone is asking about how about with DDGS? Is it available or the price is too high as an alternative ingredient?
It is definitely an alternative. It's a much more widely used ingredient in the US. It's less used here in Australia. It might be the volume of production. I haven't looked into it personally, but it was one of our ingredients in the list. And also, I am not sure about the price, unfortunately, at this stage.
Okay. We do have another question here. How did you compare different treatments? Which statistics software did you use?
We normally use, so our studies are designed on a randomized block design, complete randomized block design, and then some of them are factorial design if you're playing with crude protein, two main factors literally, or three main factors. So it's crude protein level and the feed formula. I use SAS to compare them. I use mixed models of SAS, and then we look into Tukey's post hoc comparison of the means.
Yeah.
For the performance data, normally pen is the experimental unit, but for anything after that, like meat quality or gut microbiota, individual bird becomes the experimental unit.
Okay, thanks. We have another question here. So do alternative proteins really reduce carbon footprint, water use, and land use, or just shift the burden?
In another study that I have just listened to the presentation from Integrity Ag, if we replace imported soybean meal in the chicken feed, it reduces the feed carbon footprint by 40%. So this is presented and I think published also. You can look into the data they have compared. But right now we are going to do life cycle assessment and carbon footprint analysis in our studies as well. But so I don't have the data from our study, but I know that if you go to the extreme of total replacement of soybean meal, probably you're improving 30 to 40% of the carbon footprint. It is also depending on where the soybean meal is coming from.
Yeah.
So is it coming from China or South America? Because in South America, we have land use change at a much higher rate, and therefore it has a higher carbon footprint. But soybean meal from other regions don't have that high carbon footprint. So it depends on the regional production site.
Another few questions. So what about long-term studies? Do you have any details? Because you have shown through some of these broiler studies that there could potentially be no difference in performance if we replace soybean meal. What about laying hens when you mentioned some of them needing to be under performance, obviously performing for 100 weeks or so? Do we have any
Yes.
data? I will imagine it's not easy to perform a long-term study due to
Yeah.
cost and other reasons. But can we actually replace soybean meal when it comes to 50 weeks, 60 weeks, 70 weeks?
Yes, I believe we can. And fortunately, Professor Rora from Coffee has a long-term study on hens. And hopefully, at the end of this year, we will have some good results where similar aspects of dietary formulas being tested. Looking into the literature, yes, there are possibilities of replacing soybean meal for laying hens in a long-term study. And why is that? It is actually easier than broiler chickens because layers are adult birds. They have a much better developed gut and they can handle fiber much better. Their requirements not that high. So industry currently uses a good percentage of canola meal in their diet. So with a little bit of precision formulation and crystalline amino acid use, we can adjust it to be fully free of soybean meal, I believe. But data produced from UQ, wait for it, it's coming.
Excellent. A couple more questions here. Are you looking at the chicken microbiome and how it changes with the feed changes?
Yes, we are looking into chicken microbiota at almost all of the studies. The studies that we had some novel ingredients, such as black cumin meal, it actually improved the gut bacterial ecosystem by improving the abundance of beneficial bacteria. With black soldier fly larvae, we also saw a better ecosystem bacterial profile because the larvae we used was full fat. It was not defatted. And you all know that black soldier fly larvae has a very high percentage of oil with, for example, lauric acid, which is a very good medium chain fatty acid, and it improves the gut microbiota. In the other studies that it was just changing canola to soybean, we haven't seen any specific changes in gut microbiota.
Okay. A couple more. There appears to be a consumer movement towards pasture-raised eggs. Would increase BSFL aligned with pasture-raised methods or classification? And do you know if these eggs are more nutritious than conventional free-range or cage egg quality?
Good question. Um, if BSFL is used in those free pasteurized hen production, if that's the question, I believe the inclusion of BSFL, especially I am going to work on a project soon. We are starting a project on a quail farm when we are going to use a live or dehydrated full fat black soldier fly larvae topped up for quails. this is again introducing lauric acid into their diet. So yes, they do have access to grass because it's pasteurized. They do have some concentrate feed on the side as well, but that feed is not high in lauric acid, which is a medium chain fatty acid, improving gut bacterial balance. So I believe this will improve their gut health, and that, because of the medium chain fatty acids and the bacterial profile, which then improves the immune response in birds.
Okay. Another question. I'm wondering, how do you think about the application of microbial single-cell protein for animal feed? What's the challenge for its utilization in real situations?
I must say I have never looked into it deeply. I don't know what's the volume of production. It must be something that is, again, because it doesn't require arable land, it should have a very low input for, resources and inputs for its production. But the question is that what's the volume of production? And because of energy use, or energy cost, what is the final cost of the production? So the current problem with BSFL is similar. Black soldier fly larvae doesn't require that much land either, but the price is not compatible, and the reason is solely related to the use of energy because they require hot environment. So it becomes quite expensive at $4,000 per ton, where we are talking about $1,000 per ton for soybean meal. So this is not a direct competitor again. The reason I said canola meal is the direct viable competitor is because it can go very close price wise and nutrient content wise. If we process it a little bit, then we are producing it here at large volumes in Australia. So it was multifactorial decision to say this is a viable option. But then you can supplement with some other things, amino acids, BSFL, etc., etc. Now, with the single cell protein production, I'm not sure about the volume of production and the final cost. If it can be done in economic way and cheap, then yes, it can be a viable option, or at least at some inclusion rates. The diet at the end of the day is a mix and match. We need to make sure that we mix and match the ingredients to supply every nutrient we want to give to the chickens that supports their growth.
Okay, excellent. I think in the interest of time, we will leave it here. With that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Just one more slide. I would like to just mention that the next seminar in the series is on the 5th of May, and it will feature Dr. Barbara George from the Center of Crop Science, and the title of her presentation is From Detailed Crop Physiology to Sustainable Agriculture and Nature Conservation, a non-linear career pathway with the big picture in mind. So if you haven't already, the next slide, please. Sign up to our seminar invitation list using this link and QR code. And I think that's pretty much it. So with further, I think we have already talked enough. So thank you very much, everyone, again. And I believe this is the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you, everyone. See you later.